I just do not believe you. What is going on, Star Wars? What is going on? And I really thought I was done talking about this. Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. I cannot believe that I made it through Solo for the third and final of my lifetime. I almost gave up 20 minutes in, but I persevered. And honestly, I have no idea if I'm glad that I did that or not, because I think the Star Wars fandom can agree on one thing, and that is that Solo sucks. I haven't seen a positive review of this movie anywhere, but I could be wrong, so let me know if I am. But anyway, I will never be watching this movie ever again, because it may very well be the worst Star Wars movie of all time. I'll have to reevaluate after I watch 7, 8, 9 again. So we'll see. So normally what I do in these videos is I just talk about plot holes in movies. But honestly, there aren't many. I mean, there are still some, but not nearly as many as Revenge of the Sith. And I'll still go through the ones that I saw. But there aren't as many, like I said, as episodes 1, 2, and 3, the prequels. So the question then is, why do you suck as a movie, right? And I'll tell you why before I get into the plot holes. It is the horrible use of nostalgia, which I will also talk about later. The poor choices made in the plot of this movie. Whoever the hell it was that wrote this script. And the fact that I just do not believe you. This movie's believability factor is so low, I can't take it seriously. So most obviously, the issue is the actor who plays Han, Alden something, who I genuinely feel bad for because he's probably a pretty good actor. But there are just so many things wrong with this character, and I don't think most of it is the actor's fault. But the biggest thing being that there are just too many moments that pull me out of this movie and make me say, that's not Han. Points where, 1 second I'm watching something and say, oh yeah, Han would say that. And 1 second later I go, no, that is not something Han would say. And I got whiplash, constantly going, Han, not Han, Han, not Han. And it's really just sad. The other thing wrong with Han in this movie is that the story doesn't drive anything. So what did we want from a Solo movie? Most of you are probably saying we wanted nothing from a Solo movie because we didn't want it, but let's just pretend. If we wanted a Han Solo film, we wanted this movie to either do one of two things. One, show us how Han became Han Solo. So maybe he starts off the movie and isn't exactly who Harrison Ford is in New Hope, but we see his arc and how he becomes who he is by the end. Or, number 2, we get to see a young Han Solo be a young Han Solo. The problem is, we don't get either thing from this movie. We don't get number 1, the arc, because he pretty much starts out the movie as being Han Solo, so there is no arc. And we don't get number 2, to see young Han being young Han, because there are too many moments where I'm pulled out of this movie saying that's not what Han Solo would do or say. So those are my overall thoughts on this movie and why it's just bad. I will get into the very minimal positives later. But let's go ahead and talk about the plot holes and WTF moments from this movie first. My first issue with this movie, in the scene when he and Kira, aka Daenerys Targaryen, when they're running away from Corellia, I think it's called. The stormtroopers and the Corellian hands are after them, and Han and Kira stand in line, trying not to draw attention to themselves, and Kira asks, "Where are we going?" And he says, "As far away from the Empire as possible." Cut to about 5 minutes later when Kira gets captured and he has to keep going so he's not captured as well. He joins the Empire to be a pilot when 5 minutes before he wants to get as far away from the Empire as possible. I get that he wants to be a pilot, but it just seems so backwards, hypocritical, weird, out of his character. Why? Oh my god. Next thing that bothered me, Han speaks Wookiee. Never did in the original trilogy, but he's speaking Wookiee here. And here's the biggest issue with it, besides it just sounding utterly ridiculous. At first, when I saw the scene, I was like, okay, maybe throughout the years afterwards, Han teaches Chewbacca some English, so then they don't have to Han doesn't have to do all the communicating in Wookiee. But then we find out a few minutes later that Chewie knows English. So they both know each other's language, but Han still needs to have a 30-second scene where he's going, I can't even do the Wookiee noise, where he's speaking Chewbacca's language. I get it, okay? They're in the mud pit. There's guards up there. They have to talk Wookiee so the guards don't know what they're saying. There has to be something that stops Chewie from killing Han. But let me tell you how it should have been done, how it could have been done. Chewie's beating the crap out of Han. Han still makes the Wookiee noise for a second, and Chewie stops. Han says, "Yes, I know a little bit of Wookiee." And then the rest of their conversations are now in English. I know they can't do this because of the guards, but why do there have to be guards there? The whole scene of Han speaking Wookiee for like 30 seconds just pulled me right out of the movie. It was so ridiculous to hear. Let's move on. Rio. Do you guys remember Rio? Probably not, because you probably only watched this movie once, unlike me, who is a masochist. Rio is part of the little squad with Woody Harrelson, and he's got, I think, 4 arms. He's some type of alien with 4 arms, and he's a pilot. Rio gets shot in the shoulder and dies. What? Luke gets his entire hand chopped off. Anakin has 0 human limbs left, and they both live. Darth Maul is literally cut in half and still survives. But Rio, no. He's shot in the shoulder, dead. What? Alright, let's move on to L3. I want to like the droids in every movie. And I think the first time I saw this movie, I liked her. And after the 2 rewatches, I saw it once in theaters, I watched it once with Dan, and then I did this rewatch here. And I just don't know how to feel about her. Because she has so much personality for a droid. I know that K2 in Rogue One has the sarcastic personality, and C-3PO has the warrior personality, and R2 has some personality, although we don't really understand it. But what really threw me over the top is actually one of L3's first lines, and I couldn't get it out of my head during this rewatch. She says, "What if I don't elect to go to Kessel?" when Lando tells her we're going on a mission. And I've just never, at least to my memory, I could be wrong, but I've never heard a droid speak that way. They usually have a master of some kind, and it just really struck me as odd, and after that, I couldn't really get into her character. Everything she did or said started to feel strange to me. Like she was more human than robot. But we just never see any other robots like this. I mean, do we? Tell me if we do, and I just can't think of it. But I couldn't get into it. I couldn't see it. Let me know how you thought about all three. I usually love all the droids, and this one I don't know. I just couldn't. This is really small, but during the L3 death scene, during the prison break, Chewie rescues another Wookiee, and apparently there's other Wookiee slaves there, and the one he rescued is like, yo, let's go with our kind, and you see like a bunch of Wookiees off to the side. In the beginning, when you first see Chewbacca, he talks about all the Wookiees on Kashyyyk were captured after the war by the Imperials, and they're all slaves. So my question is, why does Chewbacca go with his people? He and Han do not have the relationship that they should have yet. I see no reason for Chewie to stay with Han, honestly. They have a couple conversations, but there's nothing that makes me think, oh yeah, like Chewie owes Han, or yeah, Chewie and Han's relationship. Like, I do not see that at all. I don't know why he didn't go with his Wookiees. This is also super small, but at the end, Beckett, which is Woody Harrelson's character, and Chewie take the coaxium, is that what it's called? They take the real shiny, expensive, explosive stuff with them that's worth a crap ton of money, and they leave. And then everyone else fights, which is the guy who played Vision, Dresden? The guy who plays Vision in the Marvel movies, Daenerys Targaryen, and Alden, who is Han, are left in the room. They fight for a little bit. Danny kills Vision. I'm speaking in tongues right now with characters. And then Danny and Han, I think, kiss. And Danny says, go after Beckett, go save Chewbacca. I'm just gonna go grab some of these jewels so that we can get our ship. Han leaves to go after them. Han is then waiting on top of a hill that Chewie and Beckett were walking to. How did Han get there so fast? He was minutes, like actual minutes behind. And I just don't understand how he can be waiting for them on top of a hill. It's like someone beamed him down. Now I'm talking Star Trek. I've got my metaphors all over the place and characters all over the place. But Han is there, like he just transported there, and it's weird. I don't know how he got there first. I guess the explosive coaxium or whatever it's called is, really, really heavy, so it makes them take longer. I don't know. Do I even talk about Darth Maul? Apparently, you had to watch the Clone Wars cartoon series or movies to know how Darth Maul survived and is alive and well after being literally sliced in half. But as you all know, I want movies to stand on their own, and Clone Wars, although it is part of this franchise, should not have been needed in terms of information to understand this movie. Okay, this is my last thing, my last plot hole. And I really thought I was done talking about this. I really did. In episodes 1, 2, and 3, all 3 of them, I ranted about this. I really thought it was over. And then Solo came out, and I'm not done. There's the beginnings of the rebellion with these masked people that you think are villains throughout the whole movie, and towards the last quarter, they take off their masks and you find out that they're actually against the Crimson Dawn, the bad people, the smuggler bad people, as opposed to the Imperial Darth Vader bad people. There's a lot of different bad people in this movie. But they take off their masks, and the leader is a 14-year-old girl. Apparently, I'm not finished about talking about 14-year-old heiresses. What is going on, Star Wars? What is going on? Why do you keep putting 14-year-olds in charge of things? They're 14. You want to know what happens to 14-year-olds? They are Romeo and Juliet, and they kill themselves for a romance fling that lasted 3 days. We're done here. Alright, guys. Let's talk about nostalgia. Let me rephrase. Let's talk about the poor decisions of how they handled the nostalgia. So when you watch Star Wars, when you watch anything that's a prequel or a sequel, when you watch anything that is in the same universe but at a different time, the nostalgia is just a huge factor in that. And there's different ways to handle nostalgia in movies, in books, and this movie did it super bad and super wrong. And as a blanket statement, which I think everyone can agree with, they basically answered questions that we didn't want answered. Let's jump in. The first thing that annoys me is the dice, honestly. They make this big deal about these dice, and you think that it will be this super important thing. You think maybe we'll get some information. Maybe it came from Han's family, his mom. I don't recall them ever talking about the dice. They're just there. In the first 20 minutes, he gives it to Kira. And then towards the middle endish, she gives it back to Han. And that's the last we see of them. The people who wrote Solo did not see or know the plot of Last Jedi. Because when Luke comes back to give Leia the dice, you do now realize that the dice are basically a symbol of Han's ex-girlfriend who was actually evil or Sith or whatever. That's what you're saying. The dice are a token, a remembrance of Han's ex-girlfriend. But where do they end up? In Leia's hands. What? Didn't need to know that. Nope. How Han and Chewie met? I just always assumed Han and Chewie knew each other forever. When you watch the original trilogy, they're just so in sync, and I don't like now knowing how they supposedly met. I don't know why. I don't think that's how I wanted them to meet. There's not much to say about Han's last name. There's one thing to say about Han's last name. Someone wrote this down in the script, and people approved it. People then shot it. It was then in post-production, and no one said, don't. I'm holding all y'all responsible for this one. Every single person that was within the production of Solo, you all failed to act. You are all responsible for this. I mean, when you get to this scene in the movie, which is in the beginning, I think that's when everyone said, yeah, this isn't going to be canon. No thank you. Alright, last bit of nostalgia that I didn't like is the Kessel Run. They talk about the Kessel Run in the original trilogy. They also briefly mention it about Han being so awesome in Force Awakens. And I was fine having no idea what the hell a Kessel Run was. I was fine to picture it in my head as just this godly, scoundrelly thing that Han did, this really risky thing that Han did. And I wish it had been kept a secret because it was amped up and then it didn't deliver. I didn't care. I think that I don't understand what's happening in space at the time, but what can you do? All right, guys, let's wrap up and talk about the two positives of this movie. The first one, which is actually at the end, is during Han and Beckett's last confrontation, Han shoots Beckett first. Finally! Am I right? Finally, Han shot first. Very nice nod. I tip my hat to you. All right, let's talk about the real star of this movie, which is Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, as Lando Calrissian. I loved Lando in this movie. I think Donald Glover not only looked and acted like Lando, he also sounded like Lando. There were very few scenes where I thought, that doesn't sound like Lando. But he was just great. He was so great. And every time Lando and Han had scenes together, Han acted like Han as well. It was kind of like they fed off each other or something. So all the scenes with Lando in them were great. And I love the opening scene with them, with Han and Lando. And I love the ending scene with Han and Lando where they gamble again. Han and Chewie walk in and Lando's like, oh my god, Han! And they just have this little exchange that reminds me so much of their first exchange in Empire, which I'm super excited to watch this weekend. It's just great. And the other thing I loved that they did with Lando, I think in the original trilogy, you'll notice that Lando calls Han Han. And I'm pretty sure back when the movie was created, it wasn't an acting choice. It was just the guy was saying his name that way. And I love that they made it into something where Lando purposefully says Han's name wrong as a joke. I mean, I wish they had made a Lando movie. I would have loved a movie about Donald Glover playing Lando because he was great. That was pretty much it. Alright guys, that is all I've got. But thanks for watching. The next video I will have out is Rogue One because I finished Rogue One. After that will be New Hope because I also finished New Hope already. I'll see you this weekend when I watch Empire, but there probably won't be a video. We'll see. So if not, I will return for Return of the Jedi. So, thanks for watching, and I hope you like me ranting about Star Wars. I guess you wouldn't be here if you didn't, so.